All right. Welcome back to Dark Patterns. Let's get started. For the day, today I'll have my camera on because why not? All right. Let's talk about gamification some more. Let's talk about tribes and teams today. Tribes and teams. First, let's do a quick recap of last time because we had a good discussion. We talked about the illusion of progress used to gamify software. And when we got into it, most people were on the moral side, but most people who were on the moral side agreed that if it benefits the user, it's perfectly moral. And I think most people also agree that if it's not explicitly a disbenefit and you could opt out, you don't necessarily have to play the game, then it's still moral. And I think many people even agreed that, well, even if it's not necessarily to your benefit, you're using the software, you agree to use the software, so if they want to play a little game with you, it's up to you whether or not you want to play it or discontinue your use. Okay, well, all very good points, perfectly valid, but let's think about it another way today, too, as we continue to go into gamification. Although on a case-by-case basis, I think we were arguing that this might be good or this might be bad. Let's try to think about, as we talk more about gamification, what would happen if all the software in the world was that kind of game? And for you guys, already not too far off, you probably grew up going to school and playing math games in class and then playing more learning games on the computer beyond that, and everything's either scored or progress barred in one way or another, but very much true that the acceleration of that trend continues and that in a number of years it's very likely that indeed everything will be a game, or a lot will be a game. So what would the world be like? Would it be a better or a worse place if that happened? And continue that thought as we talk about other things that make software game-like. Let's also do a callback to last time. Get ready to answer this in either chat because we're going to do a little thought experiment. So we talked about Piaget last time and his theories on childhood development and how him and his successors think that, well, your morality and your competence and personality and all kinds of other things are more influenced by your peer group than by the adults in your life and other circumstances and so forth. So one of the kind of weaknesses in that is, well, okay, where do people get the basis in the first place? Well, if people are influenced by their social group to be more or less aggressive, for example, where do they get their baseline aggressiveness when they're born? And surely they don't get it from other babies. And you could argue that they get it from older children, and it's kind of passed down in a hereditary way like that, or maybe it's actually hereditary, maybe it's genetic, and so forth. And we're just going to hand wave around that for this thought experiment. We're going to say we've got some 6-year-olds, and it is what it is, but let's say beyond this point, Piaget is right that as these children age, whatever arbitrary rating that we're rating them on, if we group them together, their scores are going to trend towards the average of that peer group. So let's say that this is some value that we as society have agreed is good. Maybe it's something really simple like intelligence, although that's much more hereditary and probably not a great example, but I don't know, maybe it's lack of aggression, or maybe it's agreeableness, or any other number of things that we think are nice, or maybe it's actually all of those things together and we've just combined it into one full performance score, or maybe it's something like school performance, whatever, just assume that it's good. And as adults, if we group these children together, their score, whatever this score is measuring, is going to trend towards the average of the peer group. So, if we put these 9 children into 3 peer groups, they don't have to be even peer groups, they don't have to be even groups of 3. You can put them in groups of 2 or 4, whatever, as long as you put all 9 of them into 3 groups. All right, in either chat, come up with a grouping for the 9 children that you think optimizes society. And you don't have to give me a long justification or anything, but tell me why you picked that particular grouping. So do you want to put all the high scores together? Do you want to put the low scores together? Do you want to spread them out? We'll wait until we have a couple of answers, and I'll just continue to explain the challenge a little bit until we have some more replies. So you've got 9 people. Probably should have copy and pasted this. Let me just retype it for you. So you have 9 people to group. Commas are for losers. I'll just do spaces. 9 people to group with those arbitrary quality ratings. So how do we want to put them into 3 subgroups? And if Piaget is right, then as they become adults, their score will trend towards the average. So what does this question come from in the real world? So in the real world, we try to do something similar in education. We try to make sure that children are in an environment that is approximately at their level and is approximately at the level of everybody else in the room. You're all probably familiar with AP classes, remedial classes, that kind of thing. There's kind of a foundational belief in education that putting people into bins like that is to their advantage. Well, we're not asking about anybody's specific advantage, we're asking about optimizing the whole. Now, in those situations, we assume that you get the advantage from, well, being able to appreciate the learning experience more. So if we're measuring this as class per that, well, it actually doesn't matter what the content is, it only matters what the peers in the room are like. So if you put the 2 with the 9s, well, then the average is 9 plus 9 is 18, plus 2 is 20, divide by 3, so it's 6, 7-ish. So the average of everybody in the room is going to trend towards a 6 or a 7 over time. If you believe something like that peer groups are the most important thing. So what would you do if that were to be strictly true? And whether it's strictly and completely true, well, probably not. Whether it's at least a little bit true, almost certainly. Oh, stream's in and out, huh? Let me check stream quality as you continue to think about it. I am still online, but I still don't see any answers. So you could have taken this opportunity to respond. Yeah, I'm feeding data. I am good. You trolls. No, I believe you. I'm sure it went down for a little while. Alright, well, we're taking too long, so I'll continue to give you some time, but we'll just move on to some possibilities. Okay, let's say that you wanted to optimize the group for leadership overall. Well, you could do something like this. You could put all the 9s together, and again, continue to give me your answers. You could put all the 9s together, you could put all the mid-scores approximately together, and you could put all the low scores together. And now, whatever this positive thing is, we have a good leadership class at the top. And if you think about the way our society is organized, we do something a little bit like this. The very highest performers get scholarships or something, and they go off to private school with their high-performing peers and so on and so forth. So people end up being grouped with high performers in general. And then the very, very highest performers are supposed to go to Harvard or Yale or something where they hang out with other 9s and 10s and so forth. But of course everybody else no longer has access to those high-performing peers, so especially the people at the bottom, well, they're going to get brought down to an average of 3 if we do this kind of grouping. So allows us to maintain a strong leadership class, but not a particularly great class at the bottom. Well, we could do even worse, or better, depending on how you think about it. We could actually preserve the bottom, make sure that they don't have an average of 3, and end up going more towards the center by sacrificing the middle, but continuing to optimize leadership. So we could continue to group all the top candidates together. And in order to preserve the integrity of the low scorers, in order to keep them from being, essentially washed out or forgotten or whatever you want to call it, well, we'll group them with the middle scorers. Now, of course, the low scorers get some minor benefit from this, but everybody in the middle gets a pretty significant disbenefit. Their score is brought down way more than in the previous one, where the middle here has an average of 6 and change, and here all of the middles are put into an environment where their average is 4 or 5-ish. All right, then we could optimize for equality, which was the response that most people gave in either chat so far. Well, there's only 2 so far, but it seems like both the responses are in that vein. So spread them out. Okay, if we spread them out with the numbers we've got, each group ends up with an average around 6. And the bottom scorers get a lot of benefit from that. They're being brought up 3 or 4 rank points or so, depending on how this works. So they get the most benefit. The middle scorers, unlike in the previous example, they're not sacrificed at all. In fact, they actually have hardly any impact to them. They're neither disbenefited nor benefited. Everything just continues to trend towards the average that they're already close to. But those top scorers, they get a pretty significant disbenefit. And now we have no leadership class. We have nobody at the top in adulthood. All right, then. How does software do it? It brings me to the conclusion I'm trying to get at. If Piaget is right, and people trend towards the average of their peer group, then does the increasing interaction of people with people on the internet and before the internet, things like the telephone and vehicle travel and all that kind of stuff that brought people closer and closer together, does that stuff cause us to trend towards an average? Or do people tend to group themselves into those kinds of categories anyway when they have the opportunity to do so on the internet? Think of yourself personally and think your peers in person, your friends maybe, versus your peers online. Again, if you have any online friends, which of those groups is closer to your social standing? Which of those groups is closer to you intellectually? Which of them is physically closer to you? Which one is closer to you in terms of personality? If it's true that people transition into adulthood based on the peer group that they socialize with, well, does the internet make those groups more homogeneous? Does it spread them out? Which one is it doing? And does that make a difference at all? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's only the in-person interactions that matter at all. Okay, well, let's look at school performance in the state of Ohio as an example. You've got spending, more towards the right is more spending versus performance. And they don't seem to have particularly much to do with one another, do they? So the common belief is that you spend more money per pupil and you get a better outcome. But here's, I believe, University Heights, where John Carroll's located. Shaker's somewhere around here too, nearby. South Euclid's one of these as well, also the city next door. Here's East Cleveland, one of the highest spendings per pupil in the state, and second or third to last in performance. Up here somewhere is Orange and Beechwood, and cities slightly down the street from John Carroll. Interesting. Well, what if we took everybody to online school? What if we took all these people, spent the same amount per head on all of them, and took them to online school? Would we end up with a performance dot that was just right in the middle of all of them combined? Now, obviously, there's different amounts of people in each school. Some of these ones on the side here are in places that are very, very small, and so their main expenses are buses and stuff. But, or I think Put-in-Bay has a school on the side there because everyone has to get there by boat. But yeah, something to consider if we grouped people with software into broader and broader groups. If we did online school instead of in person, would we trend everybody down towards the average? So now that we're in a mindset to talk about grouping people, let's get back to dark patterns. Today's discussion topic, we're going to talk about tribal instincts, and then we're going to talk about the dark pattern of social proof. So it's no secret that people are tribal, group creatures, but we also know that other animals form groups. There's elephants and meerkats and parrots. Lots of prey animals form complicated social structures. We usually call them herds. I think meerkats are called an army or something. But yeah, lots of prey animals do it, animals that don't eat meat. And then bees and ants, well, those are kind of a special example because bees and ants are all partial clones of each other. They share the vast majority of their genetic material with one another. Every bee in the hive is every other bee's sister. So that's a little bit different from most animals, not really comparable. But then you've got your predators too, your wolves, your lions, your dolphins, your sea otters. They form what we usually call a pack. I think for dolphins it's a pod or something, but anyway, they form groups for the benefit of better hunting down prey animals, which are basically forming groups for the better benefit of avoiding the predators or dealing with them. But it's only humans that cooperate on a big ad hoc basis. We look at other animals and sometimes they'll split off their groups into genders. It'll be a group of males and a group of females, and they'll cooperate with one another to reproduce and then go their separate ways. Or sometimes you'll have two different groups join together when one group becomes too small. But usually what happens when two packs of chimpanzees or something meet is they beat the crap out of each other. And likewise for any other animal that forms groups. When two packs of them meet, they beat the crap out of each other. And when they meet one that isn't part of their group, they're also not generally particularly nice to it. So some people, some scientists, call humans the ultra-social species because in the whole animal kingdom, second only to insects and such who are partial clones of one another, we're probably the socialist of the species, at least the socialist of all the mammals, right? And we also hunt as well as forage for our food, so we're both a pack and a herd animal. We fight for things cooperatively. We obviously hunt cooperatively, or we used to. We don't hunt anymore, but the instinct's still there. And we search for things cooperatively too, to forage, which leads to the question of whether these are the same thing, at least in people. Are these the same instinct? Well, the dark pattern of social proof relies on that instinct, whatever it is. I think it's probably more herd than it is pack, but social proof is simply the idea that humans will do what they see other humans doing. And if you want someone to do something, you just have to show them someone else doing it. It's not really about showing them evidence or showing them expertise. It's about showing them that somebody else is doing the thing that you want them to do. In real life, people like to go to the restaurant that everybody else is going to. That's why you'll go down a street and there will be a restaurant with a line, and there will be a bunch of other restaurants that don't have a line. Nobody wants to go to them, maybe because their food sucks, or maybe because the first place had a line in the first place. In the Soviet Union, there was a joke that if you saw a line, you should get in it, because whatever people are standing in line for, it must be valuable. So if you saw a queue form up, you just get in it. Figure out what it's for later. And likewise, for purchasing decisions, sometimes we buy the thing that it looks like other people are buying. The simplest example is on the grocery store shelf. If you see two different flavors of the same drink, and one is almost sold out, well, that's social proof that that one sold better. So, of course, we have a tendency to buy that one instead of the one that's not selling at all. In software, this is even easier to do because you don't actually have to have people stand in line. If I'm buying something on Amazon, it always tells me what other people bought. Other people who bought this item bought. And of course, other people who bought the same thing I bought on Amazon are essentially my blood brothers. We are as close as family, right? So of course I want to buy the same things they did. Now, is any of this stuff true? Is this really what other people who bought the item bought? It doesn't tell me how many or how likely, and I actually don't care. There's already some evidence that I get from this that's very important. If I see that people who bought that item also bought this particular case, well, that tells me that that case probably fits. And that might not even be true. Amazon might be lying to me completely about whether or not the people who bought this phone, I think, also bought the case. But it is definitely evidence that the case fits, or that it's a good case, or just to validate my choice in general, that it's a popular case. Don't I want to buy the case that everybody else is buying when I buy my phone? Isn't the case that everybody else is buying probably the best one? But there's actually more than that as social proof here. There's also the stars themselves. And next to the stars, the number of reviewers. That tells you how many people bought the same thing, approximately. I think we kind of intuitively assume that everything in the world has the same review rate, even though that's not necessarily true. We all kind of assume that if something has more reviews, that probably means more people bought it relative to the other thing. So that's a simple and extremely common piece of social proof that you see in software. The rating, which of course comes from your peers, is obviously a piece of social evidence. And then the number of reviews, which just shows you how many of your peers are doing the same thing that they want you to do, which is to buy this stuff. Here's another example from Airbnb. They tell you how many people are looking for the thing you're looking at. Well, you should book this vacation then. Other people are looking for tons of other people, 1,000 other people for the same dates. There's another element to this too that's not social proof. They're conveying a sense of urgency to you that, oh, you need to book something because 1,000 other people are looking at it. So it serves two purposes, right? But it's also showing you that other people are interested in the thing you're interested in, which of course validates the fact that you're interested in it. You're not the only one. And there are patterns like this on almost every travel site. In addition to the pretty old trick of there are only 4 spots left, or 70% of the rooms at this destination are sold out. Those are also forms of social proof. They're telling you other people have already bought this, so you should too. Testimonials are a really common and basic example. A person literally telling you to use the application or telling you why it's good. That's pretty simple social proof, showing you a human being, showing you a statement from them, obvious. But badges can also convey which team you're on and can convey social proof. I am a Twitter blue check mark. Therefore, I am on a team with the other blue check marks. And you non-blue check marks do not belong in my presence. Maybe not that extreme, but certainly to that effect. Same goes for every other social media platform that enables you to form groups, which is fundamental to every social media. Facebook has groups, Reddit has subreddits, so on and so forth. TikTok, categories and stuff, but it's still there. Why does it work? Seeing other people alleviates our sense of insecurity. When we have to make a decision, like what should I buy or where should I eat, there's a lot of uncertainty behind it if we're doing something that we haven't done before. So if we're going to a place we haven't been, buying something we've never bought, we're uncertain about it. And so we have some anxiety regarding whether or not it's going to be good or not. And seeing other people doing something, even if it's not something that happens consciously, alleviates our sense of anxiety. And that's a pretty fundamental human instinct, and it's obviously very important to our survival. Seeing somebody eat a berry and then seeing them not die should be a great reinforcement that you can eat the same berry. In the modern age, that instinct is probably not as useful, but you can see how it has a very strong evolutionary basis, that seeing somebody cross the river and not drown, seeing somebody jump off that really tall rock and not die, seeing somebody stab a mammoth and not get trampled, etc., alleviates our anxiety. We perceive ourselves as similar to certain other people. We have empathy for other people, but we also have the reverse. We have feeling like other people are similar to us. And so if a similar person enjoys A, then so might I. And the catch with executing that properly is that you have to find people that your target thinks is similar. And that's why a major focus of advertising is to use a wide variety of different kinds of actors and such, and also to try to target to the audience the kinds of actors you use. If it's a commercial for AARP, they use old people. If it's a commercial for Fortnite, they use 12-year-olds. Pretty straightforward. But what about Amazon with its phone and people who also bought the phone? Am I really blood brothers with people who bought the same phone as me? Are we really similar enough? Or is the social proof too weak in that case to work? Well, if it didn't work, they probably wouldn't still be doing it. It's one of the longest standing Amazon features. So it looks like people who buy the same stuff might be similar enough to trigger this to some extent. And then you might say, if you're really, really picky, that all proof is social because all experts are just people too, and certifications and any kind of official documentation that you own that shows that your software does something or whatever, that all comes from people as well. So yeah, sure, all proof is social in origin. Let's concede that. But there are obviously different levels of social proof, different kinds. Is a fake customer as viable as a real one? Advertisements rarely use real customers. They usually use a paid model or something. Does that okay still? When is social proof even manipulative, regardless of which side you're on? Think about that. When is it manipulative, and when is it just a person talking to another person? Is social proof manipulative when it comes from anybody outside the company that works in it? Is it okay if customers say something? Is it okay if experts weigh in? Is it okay if paid models in advertisements weigh in? Is it okay if random strangers that bought the same thing weigh in? Or is it just anybody at all? So for today's discussion, if you're on the moral side, you think that providing social evidence that's not untrue, so we're just going to not talk about lies today. Let's assume that everything that you're providing social proof for is actually true. In the case of user-generated reviews, you would just say that the company that's overseeing those is not doing any kind of moderation, so the user can say whatever they want. So it's either true, or let's just take for granted that the company is not responsible for the statement. If you're on the immoral side, you think that providing social influence is just generally wrong. And you might offer some exceptions, like that expert testimony is okay, and that it's fine to say something like, we have 1 million customers, or 90% of our customers love us. It's fine to say data, social data. It's just not fine to say Bob loves us and here's why, and give some testimonial from him. And if you're on the amoral side, you think it depends on what kind of proof you're offering. What kinds of proof are okay? All right, with that, let's begin the discussion. I will see you in Discord.